Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. Sorry for Thursday and Friday. We had some logistical issues and travel issues and things of that nature. I was up in Toronto on Thursday, and Ack was making his way back from Florida on Friday. But we're here. We're getting close. It's less than 2 weeks from the end of the regular season. Playoffs, I believe, start Monday, May the 2nd. So we'll have a lot to look forward to. But we'll start with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
So something shocking happened. We always talk about things always happen at baseball games that we've never seen before. Well, this one I didn't expect. During God Bless America at Citi Field, Mr. Met took his hat off. Mr. Met has waited since like 1962 or 63, all these years, to take his hat off. He's never done that. Mr. Met has never removed his hat in my entire lifetime, and he did. And this is astonishing. Like, this became like a thing on Twitter. Like, it did.
What? Why did he do it? Did he say why? Of course, he doesn't speak, right? So
he just did it out of respect for, like, when they say, "Hey, please remove your hat."
But he's never done it before. So is it a new guy playing Mr. Met? Is that?
I don't know.
Wow. But he's never done it before.
Never done it.
Wow.
Is everybody traumatized?
Everybody's just shocked. Everybody's just shocked because, one of the reporters happened to notice it, and he tweeted it, and it's like, yeah, look at that. Mr. Met doesn't have his hat on.
That's unbelievable. That's a great take. Just because, now you wonder, like, why he didn't all those years.
Right.
Is it a new guy? So, first of all, the Yankees are coming town here in Detroit.
Yes.
And it's snowing, like it's sticking. Like, I'm staring out my window right now, and we've got an inch of snow, on the ground. It's still coming down. So I don't know what's going to happen, but it'll probably be 60 tomorrow.
Yep.
Right. Well, we had snow for Easter Sunday, and I posted a picture of the snow, about an inch of snow on the ground on Easter Sunday, and I said, "Hey, happy Easter!" What the? No, because it's like come on, it's April 7th. It was April 17th. Give me a break.
Yeah. It's not unusual to have snow because you never know when Easter's going to be. Sometimes it's early and all that kind of stuff. So, sometimes we have all that. But, one of my favorite things in the radio we have in Detroit here, I don't think they have it anymore, is, what's my beef? And on a certain day, a radio station allows you to come in and you get to, complain about another man's pants or a uniform that you don't like or something of that nature. And this is my beef today. And Russell chime in on this. And I don't know what happened. Why can't major league players now execute a rundown? I just saw it again today. I've witnessed now since the start of this season, which isn't very old, at least 4 or 5 rundowns that are executed so poorly that you would have thought Little League.
They don't practice it. They don't do fielding drills anymore.
It's so simple too. You were taught when you were young, you run at the base runner.
At the guy, yeah.
Yeah, and they don't.
But you know what the problem is? If they don't do that, Kev, they don't have a guy backing up the other guy like you're supposed to.
This is the thing that drives me absolutely batty about baseball today. Okay, I get launch angle, I get the fact that home runs are valuable and all that stuff, and the analytic approach, and guys like Joey Gallo who hit 195 but hit 40 home runs are accepted now, and I think those players are one dimensional and I hate them. When you have the shift as pervasive as it is. And I saw Anthony Rizzo do this like 4 or 5 games ago. They I think it was the Red Sox, maybe the Blue Jays, who had shifted everybody over. They had 4 infielders over to the right of second base, and he's a left-hand hitter, and he dropped a bunt and he got a base hit. And it's like, if these guys just did that, they would make these teams stay out of the shift, and then it would be easier for them to get.
McNeil popped one the other way when they did that on him too. But the thing is, what they're always afraid of is that they're going to foul up their swing if they go out of their way to do it
with a bunt.
No, look, guys just don't practice bunting either.
No, they don't.
I mean,
they
yeah,
could get hurt bunting now because
I mean,
so.
I realized the days of, and I remember two guys who I worshipped as players who did it to perfection. Keith Hernandez was a left-hand hitter, and he would hit the opposite field. He'd hit the left field or left center all the time. And Tony Gwynn had amazing bat control. He could hit it anywhere. I mean, if you had a player like that, Ichiro used to drop the bunt, but he could hit opposite field too. If you had guys like that playing in this league, you could have somebody hit 400 because these other teams are so stupid that they line and now they're playing softball. They're playing 4 outfielders.
Yeah, they did that. Like I said, Christian, I forget his name for the Diamondbacks. He's their first.
Pash. Was it Pash?
No. Walker.
Christian Walker. Yeah.
They had him set up like that for the Met game too, and it was just like. And I remember we were at the game, and someone said, "Why doesn't he hit the other way?" And I'm like, "This guy is a dead pull hitter. I don't think he can do it."
Well, we're going to see an end to that, which is very good.
Which is good, yeah.
Yeah, and it's legislating that out of it. I don't understand why they didn't do that before.
They tried to do it this year. They said it was going to happen, and then for some reason it rolled into the season, and I never got an answer why. The other thing about bunting, Mike, because you mentioned Hernandez, is he used to, if there was a man on first and second, whatever, he would rush in and get the guy at third, and very few first basemen could do that.
Right.
But we don't see. Those are exciting plays to me, but we're just never going to see them anymore.
Right, and honestly, I can't say that and we'll start the show after this. I can't say that we don't see great defensive players at particular positions anymore. But, if a guy like, say, a Bo Bichette, who's an excellent hitter, but I think he's an average shortstop, it doesn't matter that he's an average shortstop. If he hits, 320 and 30 home runs, they just accept the fact that he's an okay fielder.
Some guys work on it. I mean, Pete Alonso has gotten much, much better at first base for the Mets than he was 2 years ago. But for the most part, I think you're right. I think, there's not an emphasis on it anymore. But,
we've got to stop thinking in terms of 300 hitters being the demarcation line.
Right.
It's 270.
Right.
I'm in a rotisserie league. Now, again, it's early. I get it. It's the first 10 days of the season. But I have a team batting average of 223, and I'm 4th in batting average.
Well, Kevin, you know what it is? It's the fact that the batting average is less meaningful now. And believe me, I've been a fan of on-base percentage because I played Stratomatic baseball, and if you had a walk, it was the same as a hit. It was basically what the Billy Bean character in Moneyball says. We just care that they get on base. I get that, but you can go too far. When you have a guy who's hitting below the Mendoza line and has 100 walks, I mean, I'm sorry. It's like
I'll tell you where it goes.
No, that's still good though.
I'll tell you, it is good, but I'll tell you where it goes too far. If you're in late innings in a game and you've got like your 3 or 4 hitter, and that guy decides to take a walk when you really need runs, then it becomes problematic because
that rarely happens.
No, but it was happening to the Mets a lot last year, and I didn't know if it was happening around the league, but some guys do kind of train themselves now to walk rather than potentially making out, but some guys have to drive in runs. That's all.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right on that, but I think guys know when that's their mission. The problem is not, the fan base doesn't always kind of understand that, that sometimes you gotta, but I think it's funny. I talked to a couple of former players just recently, former major league players for a project that I was doing. And one of them, I made reference, to the lofting the loft swing and the uppercut, and he goes, "Oh, you mean the softball swing?" That's what he called it. So yeah.
All right,
let's get going. I got a subject I want to get everyone to talk about. I think you guys will enjoy.
Cool. Okay, here we go. Hello, Hockey World. It is Monday, April 18th, 2022.
I'm Michael Agello, and today is the 80th anniversary of the Doolittle Raid, which, if you ever want to see a great history movie, watch 30 Seconds Over Tokyo. Fantastic movie.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen, Hockey Buzz.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. It's the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And we got some things to talk about. And we're also going to, Kevin, you've got something. Why don't you start with your thing, Kevin? Then we're going to.
Yeah, we've talked before on the show. I'm really in favor of expanding the playoffs, making it more like baseball. I just think the one game playoff is so much fun and so exciting. And I think it would translate well to hockey as well. I think people would enjoy that. And, my argument to those who say, you make the regular season unimportant. Well, it still happens already. We're just going to change it to the 83rd game instead of the 82nd game.
Yeah. Well, okay. Let's extrapolate from that, because I don't like the NBA, the way the NBA is doing it, which is they have 7 versus 8 play, and whoever wins that is the 7th team, and then 9 plays 10, and whoever wins that one, whoever loses that one is eliminated, and then the loser of 7-8 plays the winner of 9-10. I mean, okay, how about just 7 versus 10 and 8 versus 9, and you don't have to do this complicated, convoluted thing? Or
yeah. Well, I don't watch the NBA, but
I don't either. But I know the system. And the thing is, with Major League Baseball, they're doing best of 3s. And Kev, we know that there's a precedent in the NHL of them playing best of 3 first round matches. It was that was going on in the early 80s. So
but I think best of 3, kind of takes away from it. It's not enough to be a regular series. So if we're going to do that, let's just do the one game. It's exciting. Okay. And, if you don't want to be in that position, then don't, end up as, just, play better and get out of that. And again, it still comes down to that now. So, we may see that with LA and Vegas. It could come down to the final game.
If we adopted what Kevin is saying, or if we adopted the NBA scenario, the New York Islanders would be in the playoffs right now, but instead
it's over. Anyway, I had to bring that. I had to bring that all up, but that's not my point here. Is not that it's time to do that or anything of that nature, because I've been thinking about all that. Because one of my contentions is, one of the reasons I want to do this is we have 32 teams now, and 16 don't make the playoffs, and it just seemed like that's wrong. Like we should have a few more. However, now this is my point, and this is what I want to talk about. If we look at the standings right now, other than Vegas, right now, is there anyone who says, they're not going to get in, they really deserve to get in? I think not. If you looked at the standings this year, I think you can make a real good argument that 16 is the right number of teams to get in.
It is interesting, right? I mean, and when you look at, especially when you look at goal differential, right? Like when you look at goal differential, the goal differentials are there, and I mean, the reality is people get fake points from losses in overtime, and that also plays into this too, and that I think is a major part of this as well. But I mean, when you think about when we had 24 teams, and when you're talking about the 80s, 24 teams, I remember 24 teams, and I remember 16 teams making the playoffs with 24 teams. And now we have 16 teams making the playoffs with 32, So
but it's slightly contrived, because the team, the majority of those teams that are in the bottom 16, a lot of them sold off at the deadline, so they're further behind.
That's also you can't. They also did that because of the system. I mean, they did that because there's only 16 teams making the playoffs. I mean, that's why.
I'm with Kev. I mean, I looked at it, and maybe Vancouver's the one you look at and say, but honestly, if you're not in this point system, they're a 500 team. They don't deserve to make the playoffs, even though in other sports, sometimes a less than 500 team makes it, like the NFL.
Well, I will say this. I mean, the Islanders right now, I mean, if you look, I mean, they're not going to make the playoffs. We know that. But when you go back to if you go back till, I think I did it earlier, just a little bit ago, you go back to February 1st, they have the best record in the division since February 1st. I mean, they are a good team right now. I mean, and the reality, and whether or not
they just took the first third of the season off.
I know.
But they took 4 months off, 4 out of the 6 months off.
For sure. But if you want the best teams playing at the end of the season in the playoffs, they're one of the better teams right now.
Yeah, but we don't wait the end of the season more than we.
The Toronto Maple Leafs from like 2006 to 2009, they had the best record in the NHL in March and April. it's friggin' meaningless because
It's hard to
there's
say
no pressure that's on.
hard to say the Canucks deserve it more than the Islanders do, in my mind. Like, I think that
You know what the difference is, though? Again, the pressure has been off the Islanders forever. They knew they weren't going to make it, but they're still playing hard because they play hard, and that's good on them. But the pressure's been off of them forever. They see the standings. They knew.
Yeah, I mean, but they're, although, you know, their coach and their general manager weren't acting that way, so the attitude wasn't.
Of course, they're not acting that way because they're doubling
they
down.
can't.
Well, I don't want to get to the Islanders debate, but I think
No.
So there is a good debate here, Eck, because they're doubling down on next season now, and like Mike told me last night, they still can't score.
No. I mean, they played the Leafs last night. The Leafs without Austin Matthews, and really, it was a tight game for like the first two periods. The Leafs got a goal in the late in the second period to make it 3-2, and really from that point, the Islanders had one or two scoring chances. And honestly, I look and we'll do postmortems on these teams before the playoffs, but I look at the Islanders and I say, okay, what do they need to do to get back to where they were the last couple years, which means in the playoffs and challenging for the Stanley Cup? They need probably two really good offensive players to be able to be a difference makers, and they don't have the cap space to do it.
Here's the thing about them, okay? And they, obviously the beginning, no one's back and wants to make excuses, but the long road trip in the beginning of the season didn't help them. And then the fact that Thomas put in the chat room, which is absolutely right, is that they have 9 overtime losses and 6 shootout losses.
Well, why do they have 9 overtime losses?
You're looking at 15 points there,
right.
That,
because they can't score. That's why they have 9 overtime losses.
Yeah, right. They have one of the best goaltenders in the league.
They do.
So, I mean, the reality is if they have guys on their team that should be scoring, they're not.
Igor Shesterkin is probably winning the Vezina Trophy this year. If Chris Kreider didn't score 50 goals, or if they didn't have Panarin, or if they didn't have Zibanejad, he'd be Sorokin right now. He'd be a guy who has more losses than wins or a worse record because his team can't score in front of him.
My basic point with the Islanders is, aside from what they might be able to do in trades, some of the guys that they have paid and are counting on for goal scoring haven't been goal scoring for a while, not just this season.
I mean, the mismanagement, Kev, of the Islanders in terms of re-signing Palmieri. I mean, I don't have a problem with them bringing in Zach Parise on a veteran deal or signing Zdeno Chara for a year. It's paying Palmieri $5 million.
Palmieri was a pretty effective scorer, though.
He was. I was behind the signing.
Kevin's point for a second. To pull it back to Kevin's point for a second. You got to count the whole season for the Islanders. But you also have to count the whole season for the Capitals. And the Capitals started off incredibly strongly. And now, if the two of them were to meet in a playoff series, I'm going with the Islanders.
Fine, but
what you're saying, if you have that play-in game there, if you have that play-in game, I'd rather have the team that's hot at the end of the year than the team that's hot.
Yeah, I mean, before they lost to Toronto last week, the Capitals have won 5 games in a row. They were gaining on Boston.
They did. They've been hot and cold all year.
Well, we've kind of deviated from my point, but I do have some points to make about the Islanders and about what Eklund just said. Number one about the Islanders is they're, and this is to Russ's point, like they're the only team that's among the league leaders in goals against average that isn't in the playoffs. Right. They're the only one. They're up. We always say defense wins, but not if you're the Islanders because they can't score.
Yeah.
There is some deficiency there, which really, as I said, this really isn't, kind of, part of all this. And if we did go to a 1-game elimination, essentially you're talking about a game 7. And I don't think it matters whether you're playing well or not playing well. I think it comes down to it's a flip of the coin who's going to win a single game. It seems. I mean, that's the way it is in baseball. And I'm sure that's the way it'll be in hockey too. I mean, game 7s, that's what we always say. It's a flip of the coin.
But I do want to say, I thought the Palmieri signing was good. Yeah, I had no idea he was going to go this bad this quick.
Yeah, neither.
But I didn't like the Pajot signing. I thought he was overpaid.
Right.
And Bailey was overpaid back in the day.
But here's my other point about this. And, again, this discussion didn't go in the direction I was expecting it to. My only point was I thought that maybe maybe 16 is the right number of teams. Like maybe that's what we get. Now, but the second element to this is how surprising that really it should be to us, because this is a parity league. We expect everyone to be close, and it's really not been the case. Like, we sort of knew for a long time, who the best teams were. Like, even in the West, Vancouver was on the edge of it there, but they weren't all that close. They really had to make a run in order to do it. And then Winnipeg was there too, but it was clear that the Winnipeg Jets and the Canucks were not at the same level as other teams. And I think that's kind of curious that,
Kevin, you're dead on, but I've been writing about this and thinking about this for a while too. In a flat cap league, what we're seeing is a flat cap over 3 years now. And now we're seeing that parity disappears a little bit in a flat cap league. I mean, and I think that I honestly, if you look at the difference between if you went back 3 years ago, you'd have a lot more teams that you would say, okay, they should probably be in the playoffs. Let's go back right before the COVID season, and you'll see a lot of that, right? You'll see a lot of teams that are like, okay, there's a lot of battles for those final playoff spots. It's all close. There's not that many teams there. There's not like 20 teams that are minus 30 in goal differential. I mean, look, that was exaggeration, but we have like at least 10 teams now that are minus. That didn't exist 4 years ago. I mean, the parity, what has happened is without the ability to sign players and without the ability to actually improve via free agency or
development and drafting and development and
all that stuff, we have seen parity go away. I mean, we've seen parity really disappear.
But the teams that had money 3 years ago should have gotten better and closed the gap.
Sure.
Right, but what we're looking at,
spend bad money.
We're looking at who spent the best like 3 or 4 years ago. Right now, like, we're seeing that play out because you haven't been able to do that much. You haven't been able to change that much, and without being able to change that much, it's really become an interesting league. And it really is these. I mean, we are looking right now. You have the Panthers have won 10 in a row. The Blues have won 9 in a row. The Avalanche have won 9 in a row. The Canucks have won 5 in a row. We've seen these big differentials between teams that are just not able to win and teams that are not able to lose. I mean, it's crazy this year how big. We have 8 teams in the playoffs in the East. I think that are almost at 700 in winning percentage, which is like astonishing. That number.
So just as an example, like you brought up Colorado, they're one of the better teams at drafting and developing right now.
Yeah,
for sure. Are. And it shows. Now Florida's good at it. They're not as good as Colorado, but Zito made up the difference by getting those other signings that were brilliant.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Zito, changed the 66% of his team. So
yeah. He also with a lot of cap
and a flat cap league.
I mean, with cap space though, like he came into Florida, wasn't spending to the cap as much as they are now, and he also had some more space than everybody else had. Not that he didn't create.
Yeah, but he kept all of his top players.
But he also had the advantage, like Tampa Bay, of being able to pay his top players a slightly less tax situation. Yeah. Tampa Bay's paying Hedman's the best one of the best contracts in terms of bang for your buck that you can get. He's not even making $8 million.
Okay, but to be fair then, and while that does exist in that market and is a plus for them, in a year and a half or less, Bill Guerin has completely transformed the Minnesota Wild too.
He has done it, and he's done, and it can be done. I mean, what we've seen is with a flat cap, the general manager matters a whole lot more. We've seen,
you have to be really aggressive, and you have to. It sounds cliche. You have to make the right moves, but
you have to know what you're doing. You have to know what you're doing, and you have to be smart. And you have to. And one of the reasons I was really a big fan of Zito and Guerin before they got jobs is I knew they were both really smart. Like when you talk to these guys, they are really intelligent guys.
But with Guerin, the Piper is still going to have to be paid over the next 3 years. I mean, that's what right now it's great, and they have Kaprizov under contract. But when you have $12 and $14 million in dead cap space because of Parise and Suter, I think it was the right move. I think Suter can still play, and we see how he's playing in Dallas. But that dead cap space, unless they make a trade for Shea Weber's LTI contract, I think they will. But right now, it's pretty daunting what the future holds for Minnesota because they're operating at a $67 or $68 million cap while everybody else is operating.
Yeah, they're calling up 2 guys a year, Mike, and Marco Rossi will be up next year. Like they are able to overcome some of that because of that.
Yeah, and just to make the point about Zito, he inherited $33 million worth of contracts for 5 players. And that's, it's not 40, which seems to be the magic number for Mike, but it is, it's not insignificant. 33 million. That's almost half the cap.
Yeah. He made some really, really shifty moves and some great moves, no question about it. And those moves paid off. He's
not paying Duclair a ton of money. He's not.
And he did give Barkov 10 million, which is more. Or he went over the 10 million barrier that everyone's trying to avoid. So
it's a minor move, but getting a player who is at a certain point, I think a couple weeks ago, is still scoring at a point per game pace in Mason Marchment, who's playing on their third line, getting him from Toronto for Dennis Malgin, who's leading the Swiss league. Stuff like that. That's a fantastic move by Zito. But adding Bennett when everybody said no, he's not that good. You get to give up a couple second-round picks. Bennett's been really good. Signing Sam Reinhart in free agency. Almost every move that he's made has been really.
I really do think, to finish off Evan's thought, is that I really do think that is what's happening. I think that we are not in a parity league right now, which is the first time.
I think that's true. I think you're right.
There are way too many teams with way too many goal differential deficits to think that we have parity right now. Like, we have enormous gaps. And when you watch some games, you see it. And then when you watch the top teams play, you see it. That's why I want to transition to Minnesota, St. Louis. Two games that happened on Friday night or Saturday night that I think were vitally important for the rest of the season.
Right.
The first being Minnesota, St. Louis.
And I watched some of that game. I watched
It was a hell of a game. It was a great game. St. Louis comes out and Minnesota battles back. But the reality of this game was we now see that I do think that Marc-Andre Fleury is going to be the goalie for them in the playoffs.
I didn't know that. I didn't know the domination that St. Louis had over Minnesota. I think in the last 10 games, head-to-head, St. Louis is 9-0-1, something like that.
Listen to your own podcast, Mike? Did I not make like a half-hour thing on that?
I tune out everything you say.
No, but I did a half-hour thing about how Minnesota was dominated by St. Louis.
You know what the big thing about Fleury is? He may be playing close to the same rate that he was the last time he was in the playoffs. But the one difference with him that's still there is the stick work. And he really can get the puck to a player to get out of the defensive zone quicker than any goalie they had. Cam Talbot is not good with the stick. And that's a massive difference.
In that game, Talbot gave up the kind of goals that were the problem, why they went and got Marc-Andre Fleury. Right. And I think I thought it was brilliant that they played Talbot in that game because it kind of helped define things a little bit.
The Braden Shen game-winning goal was in my mind was inexcusable. But okay, this is the thing I wanted to talk about, because I think more than any other playoff, going into the playoffs, Kev, we have so many teams that have big goaltending question marks. We just talked about Minnesota, and I agree. I think Fleury is the guy. If you're trading basically a conditional first-round pick to get him, you got to play him in the playoffs. But now Freddie Anderson is hurt in Carolina, and if it's a serious injury, your starting goaltender for game one is Antti Ranta.
Is there a thought that it is? I didn't see that it was a serious.
Yeah, no, there is a thought.
He's having an MRI. He's having an MRI.
Oh yeah, but I just wasn't paying attention. I knew he was having an MRI, but the original thought was he was going to be fine. So as that must have changed then.
Well, they're saying they're not saying much. They're saying week to week, which is week to week. With 2 weeks left in the season, it's not good.
Pierre Kochekov's pretty good too, Mike. So if Ranta were to fail, he did play in the KHL. It's not like he's not played like.
Well, yeah. You're not going to.
He's not the guy you want to use.
Yeah. Listen, you need Freddie Anderson. So.
Yeah, that's ultimately, but they're not totally stuck. They might be able to go around without Anderson, maybe.
Right. Now, so okay, there's no question with the Rangers, obviously. I don't think there's a question in Pittsburgh with, Jari is going to be the starter.
They've got Jari's hurt too. He's hurt really badly too. That happened. That came out today.
Okay, I didn't hear. I didn't
hear that one.
Tristan Jari is also. He might have broken his foot. He might be gone for the season. There's serious.
Well, he said he's week to week.
Right, week to week again. Week to week is not good with 2 weeks.
Yeah,
No, it's not good.
If all of a sudden you're going with Casey DeSmith instead of Jari, that really hurts them. No, okay, Florida. I mean, there are some people who are saying, that with a little lack of confidence in what Bobrovsky can do based on what he did in the playoffs last year. He's been better during the regular season this year, but I don't know whether, Spencer Knight, the way he's played sort of up and down like a young goaltender, whether that instills enough confidence in them to go with him over Bobrovsky. I think they're going
to do that. I mean, look, here's the other thing. Bob has played well lately, and so has Spencer Knight. They both played well lately.
Right.
And actually, they seem to have a lot of confidence in Bob right now, and there's no reason not to, honestly.
Yeah. Right.
He's also a bend, don't break type goalie, which is what they need in Florida.
Yeah. I mean, look, he's won a couple of Vezinas, but the only reason we talked about him was because he was overpaid and not playing up to that standard. He's back to playing up to that standard so far.
Even when he wasn't playing up to the standards, he swept the Lightning with Columbus. Yeah. Like he has abilities to be in a big time playoff goalie. Like Bob does. Bobrovsky has it in him. That we know.
Now, Toronto's going to sink or swim with Campbell. They seem to be doing load management with a lot of their players right now. So, Campbell, sat a couple games, and they're playing Eric Shalgren to get him a little experience in the NHL before the playoffs, if God forbid Campbell gets hurt. And obviously Tampa Bay is going to go with Vasilevsky almost every minute. But okay. You got Boston, you've got a more experienced Linus Ullmark, and you got Jeremy Swayman, the rookie. Swayman's having a really good year, but you are paying $5 million to Ullmark, and when you go into the playoffs, Kev, I would think you'd want the more experienced goalie, but Swayman has put up pretty good stats this year.
Yeah, and I think.
Oh no!
Oh, okay.
You hit the wrong button. This will be an interesting one. My gut tells me they're going to go with Swayman to start. Yes. And then we'll see what he does, right? And if he's not great after 2 games, then I guess you do put in Ullmark. Ullmark, I guess, has the chance to prove himself that way. But I don't think, because of the way Swayman has played, I don't think they're going to make a switch.
Is it Rangers the only team in the division that have a goalie? That really have a goalie that they know is a goalie? But Florida, obviously the Panthers have a question mark too, but They have 2 good goalies, but geez, it feels like Shesterkin is the guy, and then beyond that.
Well, there's no question he's the guy. Even that Red Wings game, if Kev comes back, he only faced 20 shots, but it's another shutout, and he's proved himself for sure. But not in the playoffs yet. He has to do that.
Yeah.
I think Swayman. Swayman's played 37 games. He's 21, 12, and 3 with a 2.34 goals against and a 9.17 save percentage. That's all respectable, very good. And they have a good defense and a good defensively minded club and an experienced club with Bergeron and Marchand and all those guys. But again, I just wonder what you think of.
Well, I think they'll go with Swayman. I think that team is feels pretty confident with him, and Ullmark has no history in the playoffs,
So he played for Buffalo, of course he does.
Yeah. So what's the difference? They're both sort of playoff rookies, and Swayman, I think they feel pretty good about him. I go back to when they were negotiating for the Chychrun deal, and they just refused to give up Swayman because they saw him as just too crucial to this season and their future. So
now with X favorite team, here's what they're gonna do. Hold their finger up. It's either Samsonov if the wind is blowing one way, or Vanacek if the wind is blowing the other way.
A lot of goalie questions.
It'll be Samsonov to start.
For this conference, that's a lot of goalie question marks. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. For what we just said, 700, almost 700 winning percentage teams. You're looking at Shesterkin, who we know is going to be good. Bobrovsky is probably going to be fine. But then after that.
You've got even more. Okay, so go to the other side. Colorado, fine, it's Kemper.
Yeah, it's not fine with Kemper, and this is my thinking. And everybody I've talked to with Darcy Kemper, and Kemper's had a great year, and he's been great in Phoenix. But my real question mark in talking to people, especially people in Minnesota who used to play with Darcy Kemper, where he used to play, and I talked to them, and they all say the same thing about Darcy Kemper, that they can get under his skin, that you know that he's an emotional goalie, and they really worry about his ability in a pressure situation like the playoffs.
Usually I'm the one to pour cold water on Darcy Kemper about like the injury situation, but the last 2 months of the season, I think his net save percentage is like .936.
Yeah, I have no problem with
this right now. He's ridiculous right now, but none of that. Again, none of those games have mattered for Colorado.
No, listen, I mean, Grubauer looked unbeatable a couple years ago, and he folded in the playoffs. I get it. But I can't say that Kemper's going to fold.
Jared Bednar is not flipping a coin of whether it's going to be Pavel Francouz or he's going with Kemper.
It's Kemper. But that is if Colorado has an Achilles heel and they don't have many, this is it.
Right. Well, I mean, Kemper was a backup when he was in Minnesota. He's a different goalie now. I mean, how could they possibly know what he was like because he didn't play in any meaningful games for him?
That's like saying Brian Burke knew what Ilya Bryzgalov was when he was the third string goalie in Anaheim in 2007. And they both went to Arizona, Kemper and Bryzgalov, and became star goaltenders. So he was Kemper was a backup in Minnesota, a backup in LA. He goes to Arizona. He was a great goalie with them. I continue to say the one issue with the Mac was him being able to stay healthy. He's been able to stay healthy this year. I don't think that's the question. If somebody can get under his skin, fine. But I don't think that there is a doubt in game one that it's going to be him over Francouz.
I think what this is emphasizing to me is not necessarily that there's a lot of bad goalies in the league, but it's just with the way the players crash it now and the way everybody's getting in everybody's kitchen, going top shelf. It's just hard to play goalie in this league. And the ones that stand out, there's not that many. We mentioned a few, Shesterkin, Vasilevsky. There's not that many. There's maybe 5 that really stand out.
And here's the next one, St. Louis. I mean, okay, you've got Binnington, who is the Stanley Cup winning goaltender, who is signed long-term, big money, and they're going with. It looks like they're going to go with Husso.
They're going to go with Husso. They are.
And so, I mean, if they go a couple rounds and Husso looks good, boy, does that bolster his resume for unrestricted free agency in the summer.
Yeah, but why wouldn't they? I mean, they went with an unheralded goalie before, and then they ended up with wearing Stanley Cup rings. So
Binnington reminds me much of like Tim Thomas. Like Binnington reminds me of the Tim Thomas story. Like no one ever gave Tim Thomas any respect, and he just went out and he won. Right, he won a cup. And then
there was a reason they didn't give him
respect. They're always trying to like replace him.
He was a journeyman. The Tim Thomas story stands alone.
Binnington is I'm not saying he's a journeyman, but
Binnington was
forever for St. Louis to give him the respect to bring him up in the NHL.
Binnington was a well-regarded prospect. It just
he was supposed to be up 2 years before he was up.
Right.
Sometimes guys get lost in the mix. It happens.
Yeah, Jack Campbell only got to the NHL after 7 years?
Right. And I'm not trying to disparage any of those players because you're right. I mean,
we get it.
He could turn out to be the best pressure playoff goalie ever. I'm just simply saying what I've heard.
I mean, if I'm Minnesota, I go with Fleury, but we'll see. Calgary, we know it's going to be Markstrom. Okay. Did Mike Smith visit the fountain of youth in Florida? Because all of a sudden he's like playing like he was when he was 33. Yeah. And now if he plays like that, Kev, they have a chance. But I don't think he maintain that.
I mean, he did play that way last season.
He did.
Like he really did play well. But the key here is, and I've been talking about this now for a couple of weeks. I don't know if you watched them, but the Oilers are playing well.
Yeah,
they've got it together. And I think that, just like great goaltending can get a team back on track, sometimes, team playing well can get a goalie, and make him hotter than he was or get him going. And I think that's what's happening there. That, Smith's is an experienced guy. He's been around the block. He's seen it all. And, he's older. And, he's not a guy that I think you're originally going to anoint as your savior for the season. But, if he's playing this well and the team's playing well, then, kind of who knows. But going back to Kemper, I don't think it's unreasonable to say that Kemper still has to prove himself.
Sure.
Because
it's not unreasonable.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have reason to believe, I think he's won more games than he's lost when he's been in the playoffs, which, I think he's only
got better about Kentner in the playoffs than Mike Smith. So,
Yeah.
my point is, I don't okay, yes, he has to prove himself, but I don't think that there's a doubt that he is going to get the opportunity.
No.
It's not like St. Louis where they could go with Husso or they could go with Bennington, and it's a flip of the coin.
I'm not saying that at all.
Well, like LA, who is going to start game one? Is it going to be quick? Is it going
to start? You have to start quick game one if they're in the playoffs. You just can't do it any other way. You really
because
can't.
he's the veteran guy and he's won.
Yeah, and he's won before, and
you have to give him the opportunity.
Goalie. He's proven to be a playoff goalie.
Yeah.
I mean, proven playoff goalies are different. That's why Fleury is where he is. I mean, Fleury, an interesting thing, the last night, Fleury, the Wild beat the Sharks 5-4 in overtime. Fleury plays, and he doesn't play fantastic. I mean, he plays an okay game, but in overtime, he makes like 3 stellar saves. And this is like so Marc-Andre Fleury. It's like, it's like the difference between the Minnesota winning and beating and Schen's goal, like you said, on Talbot, and then the stellar saves that Fleury makes to hold the win for Minnesota last night. That's the thing about Fleury. It's like that level that he has and the gamesmanship in his blood to just pull it up to that level. You just can't turn away from that.
And just to emphasize the point I've been making about the Sharks, so they signed Thomas Bordeleau, and he gets an assist in his first game, and he's a very good player.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't want to look at what they have on the outside that they're going to bring in. Even William Eklund did a post saying that this has been a very difficult season, but he thanked the team that he was on. He plans on making the Sharks next year.
Oh, yeah. Sharks next year.
They just didn't
another game that I was talking about that I think really was meaningful this weekend was the game you were mentioning, Mike. So as well, I wanted to go into it now. Was the Edmonton Vegas game, which is the 4-0 shutout of a Vegas team with Stone in the lineup, Eichel in the lineup, Pacioretty in the lineup. That was a telling game, and the Vegas now has their most important game probably it's hard to say the most important game in their franchise history, but the first, if they don't beat New Jersey tomorrow, like that's at home, then they're done, right? That's it.
Well, it doesn't finish them, but it looks
doesn't
bad.
Finish them. That's got to beat New Jersey, right? And New Jersey is a tough team for them to play because New Jersey plays the way they play. That's going to be a really interesting game because they play similar styles. I think that's going to be a really fun game to watch.
I mean, again, if they don't make the playoffs, somebody's head is going to roll there because there's things that happened. Whether you want to talk about the Dadonov thing, just getting Eichel there, everything they had to do to fit in Eichel, it's just.
And now trying to force this whole thing together.
I know, Kev, I know things happen in professional sports that are unfair, but when you have an owner that says, go out and get this guy, and you do that, and you're following orders, you do that, and then you don't make the playoffs, and then you get fired because you did that. Yeah,
I'm not sure he's going to get fired. That's
right.
I've heard he's so close to the owner. I don't think.
I think there's a better chance. I think there's a better chance that DeBoer gets fired than it is. Kelly McCrimmon.
Yeah, no, I
think DeBoer gets fired. Teams will be hiring him. Somebody will hire him.
And the reality is, when they let go of Fleury, they could have gotten Eichel done, but they didn't use the money the right way. Like that was the issue. They used Eichel's money up before they even traded for him. You know what I mean? And they had
that's true. Yeah,
they had ways of making that work, but the whole thing of selling the trade of Fleury, I continually am told, was so they could go get Eichel, but yet they didn't. And so they had to get Eichel, but they wasted money on other things, and they made some
trading Josh Holden for Dadonov and adding $3 million worth of it was asinine. I still don't understand that deal.
There's so many things.
Before we get too carried away, let's not forget that they're 7-2-1 in their last 10, and the Kings are under 500.
Right.
It's not over. And the Kings have played. Only have 5 games left. Now, their schedule is incredibly easy if they just win those.
Yeah. But the Kings are a playoff team right now. They don't look like a playoff team right now.
No, they don't. So if the Vegas keeps winning and the Kings stumble here, which they have recently, they've got Anaheim twice. They've got Chicago. They have all teams that are not in the playoffs.
But think about the teams you just said. Anaheim twice. Which is, Anaheim would love to knock the Kings out of the playoffs.
Sure.
That's like a major thing for Anaheim. Chicago and LA, that's a rivalry that, the Hawks would love to knock the Kings out of the playoffs. And then they have the Vancouver at the end of the season, which could, like you said, be a 1-game play, and perhaps.
Yeah, Seattle is another team they play. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with any of that, to be honest. That's why I'm saying, like, we can't argue that you want teams to be playing well at the end of the season, and then suddenly discount Vegas because they lost to Edmonton, even though it was an incredibly crucial game, and you would have thought they would have risen up at a higher level than they did in that game. So
and Vegas. Okay, Vegas's schedule: Devils, Capitals, Sharks, at Dallas, at Chicago, at St. Louis. Tougher.
It's tougher.
It is tougher, but they have a game in hand, and
but that Blues game is probably not going to mean anything, or it might mean home ice.
It might mean home ice advantage.
Blues. I think the Blues are going to get that home ice. It feels like.
Well, if they do, then you're right. But
Washington's probably not going to mean much to the.
Okay, Washington right now is in a close race with Boston for first, second wild card. That could be the difference between playing Florida or playing Carolina
without Anderson. I know that there is something to that for sure. I mean, if you can get Carolina, if Anderson isn't healthy, that's a huge thing. That's a huge pick. I mean, right now, I'll just get that third spot. I mean, Edmonton's sitting there. If Edmonton doesn't win that playoff series,
well, no. But Edmonton fans right now are doing chants and burning incense, praying to God that the LA Kings hold on to third place. I think they want to play Vegas in the first.
No, but think about this: the uncertainty, because with Stahl and Anderson out, the more games they miss, the better chance the Rangers overtaking Carolina anyhow for the division.
And then the other game of this weekend that was telling, I thought, was yesterday when the St. Louis Blues beat up on the Nashville Predators, like completely in a game the Predators really had to win. Like the Predators now are sitting on the edge. Like they're right. I know you talked about the Preds last week as being, they could be the team that falls out too. They definitely have that ability to fall out.
If leading by 4 points is sitting on the edge, I mean, honestly, I think the team that's on the precipice, as we just mentioned, is the Kings.
It's the Kings. That's what I thought for 2 weeks. Right. And we'll see. I mean,
unless Dallas or Nashville goes like 0-6 or 0-5, they're in. It's Vegas catching LA or LA holding on to Vegas. And that's simply and then everything else is almost locked in place.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, in the West,
I agree with you with Dallas, but I think Dallas is in. But I think that with
they
Nashville,
look like they're in now. They do.
Nashville, I don't think so. I mean, I really don't, because I mean, they're one. If you think about 1 point,
but they almost had to lose out, Eck. I mean, even if they just gain a point here and a point there, they'll get in.
But they can't. They have to make a wild card. Obviously, they're not going to make the Central Division, so they are battling. For. I mean, it is possible. I mean, it's very possible that they will speak in. And obviously, they've got that lead right now. But to sit there and to watch them play over the last couple weeks, I'm just, again, like, you always ask yourself, do they look like a playoff team? Like the Kings don't look like a playoff team right now.
Kev, I wanted to take a little bit of a detour here. The report from the NHLPA came out regarding the whole situation with Kyle Beach. And over the weekend, there's some question about whether, is there a plan of succession regarding Donald Fear and, how long he's going to be in that position and, how culpable the NHLPA was in terms of, responding slowly to the allegations. What have you heard? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, yeah, I think this is one of those things that even though the report exonerated him, I think this just reminded everyone that, he's been in place a while now and he is older. But, Donald Fear has a long history of being, a guy that has integrity in terms of the way he deals with everything. So I don't know. It feels like, even though, it became, he said, she said about this, like, it still didn't feel right to me. Right. Like it seems like somebody should have said something's going on there. We need to do something about it. I can't get my finger on it, although I thought it was curious that a lot of people wouldn't talk to the investigators.
Right.
about it all. So I thought that was very curious. And I don't know how, if they had this conversation that neither party could remember exactly like that was a big conversation. Like somebody should have remembered, that it happened. And, I remember when it first came out that USA Hockey wasn't notified. Like that should have been done.
Yeah, there's a lot.
So it doesn't feel right. And I know, that those guys who do those investigations are independent, or they wouldn't do them. But still, so I don't know. But I think this will prompt the players to just say, look, we need to have something in place here to move forward. Donald Fear can't do this forever. And no matter how much you like him or you don't like him, he's going to, at some point, he's not going to do this when he's 80 years old.
Right.
It's interesting because, again, for my first book, I wrote a lot about Donald Fear and got inside information on Donald Fear from players. And say what you want about him. Again, the players begged him to be their guy. And when he does go, it's going to be hard for them to fill his shoes, no matter what, whether he did this, didn't do this, because there's so much that he does that we don't know about.
Right.
Like he does in the back offices. And even if they bring in a well-represented guy, like X says, like, Matthew Schneider, you're going to have someone to his right that's as good as Donald Fear. And there's not that many people like that on earth. So there's no way for me to say that the PA has somebody as good as Donald Fear right now.
Right.
No,
yeah.
Other
don't you think you need a lawyer though too?
I don't think Matthew Snyder could be in that. He's going to be in the hunt, but you need a lawyer, right?
Yeah, I think you do need a lawyer too. But I'm just saying, how many lawyers on earth are as good as Donald Fear?
I mean,
none.
Russ. I mean,
in labor law, right? I mean,
yeah. I mean, he's just got too much of a history in dealing with negotiations and.
We see the pitfalls that have occurred with Major League Baseball with Tony Clark, an ex-player, being the head of the PA.
Right. I'm talking about just being the face of it, really.
Yeah, I get it.
I think you can have good lawyers and a good face of it too.
You can.
You think that if you get people like somebody like Matthew Snyder is a good face of something.
He is.
He's a good guy to talk. He's an ex-player. He's represented. He's popular all around.
He might make players feel better.
Smart.
Yeah,
better, but he needs good lawyers, and there are they have some. Fear has with him a group of good lawyers that probably are going to stick around.
The only thing Alan Walsh would be good at, his hate for Gary Bettman is so great that he might help the players, but you couldn't negotiate that way. He would not be able to negotiate with Gary Bettman, so you could not hire him.
Book a barn. That's all I'm saying. Book a barn for Bettman and Alan Walsh. Carey Price made his first appearance against the Capitals. Kev, the thing is, I've heard different interpretations of this. He wanted to come back so he could prove he could play, so they could trade him in the offseason, or he wanted to come back to prove that he could play before he decides he's going to retire. I mean, there's so many things out there that he wanted to prove that he could come back, but then we don't know what it really means. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I don't think he's retiring. He's not walking away from that contract. Maybe he came back to prove to himself that he can play. He's gone through a lot psychologically. He's dealing with addiction, which is difficult, or some form that we don't know all the details about. Maybe he just needed for his own peace of mind to come back, and then he'll sort it all out in the off season about how he's going to go. But I don't think
good for 2 periods. The third period he wasn't good, but he hasn't played.
He hasn't played.
I think most of the time, and I say this, if you guess that a guy is not going to retire, you're going to be right. Not 50% of the time, but the majority of the time, it's way too much money to leave on the table. I don't think he's retiring.
He proved he can play. If he has a full preseason, he can play.
I'm not saying he's going to retire and give up that money. I think it's probably firmly established that he has a chronic knee problem, and if he could do a Shea Weber and basically say I can't play anymore, and then he still gets the money.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Not the same. Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different. Like, I mean, most of these real chronic cases, was something that was known all along. Like
Right,
they don't just come up
years and years. Yeah.
on a Tuesday. Like for example, I bring this up all the time. The Red Wings knew for several years that Henrik Zetterberg could retire and that not be used against them because their own doctors had told them, he really shouldn't be playing. And I think Shea Weber also had that he had been told for a few years, you really shouldn't be playing. And it doesn't feel like that's been going on with Carey Price.
And that's what happened with Ben Bishop. He tried to play, and after rehabbing for a year and a half, and he played a half a period, I think.
Yeah, but he's way more banged up than Price ever was.
I have something,
Go ahead.
I have something special to end the show today with, but I do want to, before I do it, I want to get to this real quickly too, because we are running out of time here. And that is what I wrote about today, and I want Russ's opinion because Connor Bedard, hits 100 points. The longest player ever to do that in the WHL, and 52 goals. And to compare that to as a 16-year-old, okay, so comparing that to McDavid, because you have to compare it to McDavid because he's named Connor. McDavid had 98 points as a 16-year-old, but only 28 goals. So we're looking at 52 goals for Connor Bedard as a 16-year-old is like an unbelievable number. First of all, there's two things I want to ask the panel. One is how good is this kid really? And the second question is it possible that he does an Austin Matthews next year and goes over to Europe and plays in a pro league because he might be too good for Canadian juniors? Like McDavid came back and played his final year, and scored 120 points. But then, a couple years later, Matthews proved that you could actually go over to just, he plays in Switzerland as a pro for a year, makes some money, and plays among men. What are your thoughts, Russ?
Well, I think the size difference would lead me to believe that Bedard may not want to go over there just because you don't want to be a target as a smaller player who's going to continue to try and get stronger until he makes his NHL debut.
Right.
He's a great player. You got to remember, early in the year when he wasn't doing well, people were like, "Oh, I don't know, Connor Bedard, what's happening with him?" And then he lit on fire like a lot of other players. I would not compare him to Connor McDavid because I don't think they're even remotely the same kind of players. And if you're going to make me pick one, I will pick Connor McDavid.
Yeah. Who would you compare him to? I mean, I know you love to.
I'm not comparing them.
Yeah, you go down that rabbit hole, Eck. It's impossible because you're holding.
Yeah, everybody wants to do it, and then we're
I know, and it's dumb. It's really
people don't follow the WHL and don't get to watch Connor Bedard.
Yeah, here's what you have to really.
He's like Connor Bedard. That's what he's like.
I'm not a WHL expert, but here's what you would have to extrapolate: how much better is the league? How much better was the league, or was the league better with Connor McDavid, or is the league better now? It might have been better with McDavid there, goaltending wise and otherwise.
The OHL,
the WHL. And so you have to think about that too.
Right.
Yeah,
the OHL too. The OHL is different.
OHL rather.
Yeah.
Different, and they're very different leagues, right? Like they have different.
Yeah, they're different leagues, but you have to look at how that league was then.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, you have seen players like Adam Brooks put up 120, 130 points in the WHL. It doesn't mean it's not a good league.
No, and Brendan Hoffman, like he just scored 50 goals too. It happens.
This kid is doing it as a 16-year-old, and I mean, there is a possibility he goes over to Europe because he did go over to Europe during like when things were shut down. He went and played a few games in Sweden. If he goes to Switzerland and makes some money, why not? But
I would do it.
I would do it. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, it worked for Connor McDavid. I wouldn't worry about the physical play. The Swiss league is not. I'm not so sure. I mean, I haven't seen the WHL in a long time, but that used to have a reputation of being a pretty nasty league.
Yes.
So I think over in Swiss league, they're a respectful league. They play hockey and they'll be playing against men. I think it helped. Austin Matthews, I would do it in a heartbeat if he had the opportunity, especially if he's going to go with a good team. So I would do that. I don't think that's a good program for many players, but I bet it is for him.
Here's the other thing too, because I did get to cover McDavid when he was with Erie. I went up and covered a game, and they had a lot of other players that could put the puck in the net, and so McDavid was very unselfish. He could have scored more.
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. And Bedard's team did not make the playoffs. Like this is like
right.
Strome, DeBrincat, Taylor Radish, Connor Brown, Travis
There are
Dermott.
a lot of other guys.
A lot of NHLers on that team.
Yeah.
Plus, it's the WHL and OHL. That's apples to oranges.
Yeah,
it is apples to oranges.
Yeah.
Too.
So, but it's just difficult, and the time's different, So, but it is fun. I like comparisons. I've never even seen that guy other than in the international play on video, so I couldn't compare him.
I haven't seen him live yet, not yet.
So yeah, so I don't have an opinion, but I do like them. I think I noticed too. The NHL has gotten in the 21st century. They were loath to make comparisons, and then Central Scouting was getting permission, and now I see on NHL.com they've actually had comparisons of the some of the top draft picks too, because that's how you sell the future of your league.
The funny thing is, I know with the debate we've had forever with Russ, and I totally respect you, Russ, for what you're.
That's just me. It doesn't mean
but I think with a lot of people, and I think that it's funny. I heard the guy wrote that NHL.com article, Kevin, where he's comparing him, and he heard him interviewed on the on XM, and he said it was interesting that people don't like to compare guys, but he says if you go up to him and you say, "Well, it doesn't remind you of Patrick Kane," that's when they'll be like, "No, he's not like Patrick Kane at all. He's more like this guy." Compare him, but they definitely don't. You definitely don't think he's Connor McDavid. So he's not Connor McDavid, at least, Russ. Like that much we're getting.
I don't think he is. I really don't.
Is he Patrick Kane?
I think Patrick Kane's probably a closer comparison because I did get to see Patrick Kane with the London Knights, and he was something, and he was, I think that's closer.
Yeah. I would say though that people love prospect stories. They really do. People are really into it. They like to know what the guys like, and they're just looking for a basis to sort of picture in their mind what this guy.
No, they are. I mean, look, that London Knights power play was Kane, Sam Gagner, and then the two Kostitsyn brothers, and it was like a pro power play. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I have something special for everybody today. I've been putting it off as long as I possibly can.
Oh, geez.
But here we are.
All right, here we go.
NHL Draft Simulator is back. All right.
Do it. I gotta get the drum roll.
Playoffs are 2 weeks from. I guess the draft simulation will be 2 weeks from tonight.
That's about right.
Right, because it'll be that Monday before the playoffs, which would be
the playoffs start on that Monday. Yes.
So I'm going to press this, and I'm going to see what happens. And I have two of these tankathons open, so I pressed the wrong one. All right, let's try this one. All right, here we go. We're going to simulate the lottery. Here we go, and the winner is today the Arizona Coyotes.
Yes, that there's the NHL fix then, because they
I can't really see it. So where'd the Flyers come in?
Fourth came in.
Yeah, that's probably where they're going to be, around 4, 5, or 6. That's my guess.
Montreal.
The Flyers came in first, but there you go. That doesn't count because
the Montreal Canadiens were second, Russ, and I can imagine when we're at the Bell Center, if they're picking second, there will be a lot of pissed off Habs fans.
Yeah, that's the worst place to be. Second in this draft is the worst place to be. I can tell you that.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Usually, no, you're probably right based on what I've heard, but usually the second's the best place.
I know. This year, I don't believe it is.
I mean, next year
you have to take whoever you get. So
next year, second would be pretty good. There's a pretty good consolation prize if you don't get Bedard. This year, it's 2 or 3 guys, Russ, that you could debate.
Yeah, you could make an argument for 2 or 3 of them, and they're all really good players. I'm not sure next year's consolation's any better if you don't get Bedard, but no, I mean,
could it be like Mario Lemieux, Kirk Muller?
I don't think I'm going to say this in the most respectful way. I don't think there's a James Van Riemsdyk fall off, even though he was a very good NHL player.
Right.
I don't think there's that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and Shane Wright, how good is he?
Oh no, Shane Wright's the real deal. He's very smart. He plays a great 2-way game. Again, he started off slow, and people were ripping him like, "Oh my God, he's not going to hold his top spot." And half a year, I kept hearing he's not going to hold the top spot. He's held the top spot because literally the day after I interviewed him, I think he scored 5 points in a game. But the good thing about this guy is he doesn't worry about any of that because he knows what he is as a player. He's a leader. He's the kind of guy that in the second or third year he'll be a captain for somebody. Like he's that kind of guy. So he can do it all on the ice. He's not a superstar, but he's a star.
Yeah, and you know, they making these comparisons. They're not making the Connor McDavid comparison to him. They're making the Patrice Bergeron comparison to him.
Yeah, even that one's a tough one to make.
Stop.
To be honest.
Stop with this.
Yeah, even Bergeron's a tough one to make.
They're having a good time, so of course you don't like it, Mike. You know,
fun. It's like that's what I'm saying. Same thing. I think.
I'm the killer of joy.
You really are. Like people are just trying to have
very closely, but
joy, no doubt.
Even like the hockey, like there may be like our 2% of hockey fans that really don't want to make this comparison. 98% want to, because most hockey fans, even the best hockey fans, don't know what these prospects are really like at all.
Yeah,
and they
that's the problem. Yeah.
You know, and they sit back and they say, Bergeron, wow, we could possibly get a Patrice Bergeron. That's
I do have to run to another show. I wanted to mention Sean Couturier had his number retired in Drummondville yesterday. That's a pretty cool thing.
That's a cool thing. All right, guys, that's all I have anyway today. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will be back again tomorrow. Great to be back on vacation, everyone. Thank you so much for you guys for carrying the weight since then.